Evening sky stretched across the horizon in shades haven been draws, casting long shadows from the Victorian mansions that line the prestigious
The way
neighborhood
the
of
light hits
Riverside
those
Heights.
blossoms is
The
just
celebration
stunning.
unfolded in a sprawling estate that seemed
It
to
feels like
belong
a
to
scene
old
from a
money and
painting.
careful preservation. Where every architectural detail whispered stories of her Italian success. This was the engagement celebration for Victoria Hartwell and Derek
Congratulations to you
Sinclair,
both.
and it had been
Thank you so much for
meticulously
being here.
orchestrated to
Cheers.
showcase the picture of romantic perfection. Soft violin music drifted through the gardens, mingling with the delicate scent of magnolia blossoms that adorned the bay corner. The evening was designed to announce to the
Victoria,
world that
from
two
the moment you
exceptional
were born,
people
you brought
had found
nothing but
each other.
joy into
That
our
love and
lives.
fortune had
We
aligned
are so
perfectly,
incredibly
and
proud
that
of the
the
woman
future
you've
promised
become.
nothing but brilliance. Victoria moved through the crowd in an elegant sapphire gown that she herself had designed, working with a renowned tailor to bring her vision to life. As a landscape
choices we
architect,
make
she carried
tonight
within her the same qualities
will
she brought to her
define our
professional
legacy.
work. A sense of structure combined with creative vision, a quiet confidence, and the beauty that came from authenticity rather than pretense. Behind her composed demeanor lay a sharp mind and principles that did not bend easily to external pressure. Derek Sinclair stood beside her, commanding attention without demanding it. He wore a tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, and he wore it with the ease of someone accustomed to fine things. His smile was practiced but warm, his handshake firm, his eyes sharp with the intelligence of a man. WHO had inherited wealth but increased it through genuine business acumen. To the outside world, they were the ideal match. The accomplished designer and the brilliant entrepreneur. A pairing that seemed destined for magazine covers and society pages. Victoria's mother approached with tears of genuine joy in her eyes, embracing her daughter with the careful deliberation of someone who did not want to disturb the intricate styling and makeup that had taken hours to perfect. Her mother whispered words of blessing and congratulation, her voice thick with emotion. Victoria hugged her back, feeling the familiar comfort of that embrace, and for a moment the weight of the evening lifted. Derek placed his hand on her mother's shoulder with practiced warmth, uttering all the right words about caring for Victoria and building a beautiful future together. Her father, a retired university administrator, known for his quiet wisdom, simply placed a firm hand on Derek's shoulder and nodded with approval. In his mind, Derek represented security, success, and the kind of future most parents imagined for their only daughter. Derek's family was equally pleased with the match. His father, a shrewd businessman, WHO had built an empire in commercial real estate. Accept Victoria with satisfaction. A cultured woman from an established family, talented and self-sufficient, was exactly the kind of partner who would elevate the family's already considerable standing in society. But beneath all this effortless perfection, there existed small details that only the most deceptive observers might notice. When one of Derek's colleagues made a joke about Victoria finally taming the wild bechale, Derek's left contained a joyousness that did not reach his eyes. His gaze flickered away for just a moment, searching for something unseen in the crowd. Victoria had noticed these subtle inconsistencies. Sometimes during conversation, Derek would drift into silence, his attention seemingly divided. His fingers would unconsciously scroll through his phone while she spoke, though he would quickly recover his attention and offer an apologetic smile. When Victoria asked about these moments, he always gave the same response, dismissing it as weak stress or nothing worth discussing. Victoria chose to trust him because she believed that love was built on a foundation of faith and confidence in another person. She reasoned that they had constructed something solid over their 18 months together, and this evening was simply the formal acknowledgement of that foundation. She did not know that Derek himself carried a small gem, one that would strike against that foundation with brutal force before the night concluded. The event reached its crescendo as the evening progressed. Following dinner, which featured an orchestra performing gentle classical pieces, semester of ceremonies announced the family speeches with practiced enthusiasm. Victoria's father rose first, offering wisdom about marriage's partnership, about building something that would last beyond the euphoria of early love. His words were measured and thoughtful, drawing subtle nods from the older guests, who recognized the truth in his observations. Derek's father followed, his speech more effusive and warm, bursting with pride for his son and welcoming words for his new daughter-in-law. The crowd responded with enthusiastic applause, and the evening seemed to be proceeding exactly according to plan. A beautiful validation of two families coming together in celebration. Then came the moment when the master of ceremonies invited the engaged couple themselves to share words with the assembled guests. Derek stepped forward first, accepting the microphone with a confident smile. His voice was deep and assured as he thanked everyone for joining them, for witnessing this pivotal moment in his life. Spoke about Victoria, with apparent genuine admiration, describing her intelligence, her creativity, her unique way of seeing possibility where others saw obstacles. The guest smiled, and several of Victoria's hands appeared to be wiping away tears. Victoria watched him with something close to wonder, feeling as a jab lap for this man who understood her so well. Then Derek's expression shifted. His confident smile transformed into something more serious and contemplative. The festive atmosphere in the room began to change subtly, like a musical key shifting from major to minor. Derek paused, and when I spoke again, his tone carried a different weight entirely. He discussed the importance of honesty in any relationship, about establishing transparency from the very beginning as a cornerstone upon which everything else must be built. The guest leaned forward slightly, sensing that this speech was moving into unexpected territory. Derek's eyes fixed directly on Victoria's face, and his next words emerged slowly and deliberately. He told the assembled crowd that there was a peasant who had been significant in his past. Someone named Sarina Mitchell, his former partner of several years. The mention of her name created an immediate among the guests. Many of them recognized the reference, understanding that this was a relationship that had ended only shortly before Derek had met Victoria. Derek raised his hand for silence, continuing to speak about his deep commitment to maintaining his connection with Serena, not just as a friend, but as a business associate and someone who would always hold an irreplaceable place in his life. Stated firmly that he would never sever ties with her, that their bond was too significant to simply disappear because he had chosen to marry someone else. Then he turned his gaze fully toward Victoria, and his expression became almost defiant, like a man laying down a challenge to see if she would accept the terms he was unilaterally imposing Victoria. Except his voice echoed in through the space. If you cannot accept this, if this reality causes you distress, then we should cancel this wedding right now, before we proceed any further. If this is not acceptable to you, then we will simply end this engagement tonight. Sharon fell into a silence so profound that it felt almost violent. The orchestra ceased playing. Even the soft murmur of conversation died away completely. Someone's water glass made a small sound as it connected with a nearby table, and in the sudden quiet, it seemed as loud as breaking glass. Every single person in the room turned in perfect synchronization to look at Victoria. In their eyes was a mixture of shock, pity, confusion, and beneath it all, a cruel fascination, the way people often find themselves drawn to witnessing someone else's public humiliation. Victoria's parents' faces went pale. Her father's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Her mother's mouth opened slightly, her eyes wide with horror and distress. All of them watched Victoria, waiting for her to shatter, waiting for tears and recriminations, waiting for the typical response to such a brutal and inappropriate ultimatum, delivered in front of hundreds of witnesses. But something unexpected happened in that crystallized moment. Victoria felt as though she had entered a sudden pro of Babel, everything on her becoming muted and distant. All the all the judgment, all the expectations seemed to belong to someone else's life, not her own, and in that silence, clarity eyed with the force of sudden enlightenment. In just a few seconds, all the puzzle pieces that she had been unconsciously collecting suddenly aligned. Derek's emotional distance, his secretive fondness, his mysterious late night calls conducted in hushed tones, his tendency to disappear into another room to take important conversations, his defense to someone named Serena whenever her name came up in conversation. Everything she had been too willing to overlook suddenly made a horrifying kind of sense. Derek was not demonstrating honesty at all. He was not asking for understanding or compassion. He was declaring his power, exerting control over her in the most public and humiliating way possible. He was setting terms and conditions, not requesting negotiation, but rather issuing an ultimatum that Victoria was expected to accept without question or complaint. Victoria understood in that instant that she was being tested and was. She was being told exactly what kind of marriage she could expect. This was not a partnership. This was ownership. She felt her hands begin to tremble, but not from fear or shame. The trembling came from a sudden surge of clarity and resolve. a physical manifestation of awakening. She looked directly into Derek's eyes, and she saw that salute sentí there. The complete confidence that Victoria would bow her head perhaps cry for the sake of the audience, but ultimately capitulate to preserve her dignity and her social standing. Derek did not know Victoria at all as light smile appeared at the corners of her mouth. Without breaking eye contact with Derek, she moved towards the Master of Ceremonies. WHO stood paralyzed in shock, and she requested a second microphone. The Master of Ceremonies, a professional accustomed to managing events, but clearly unprepared for this particular scenario, handed over the microphone more from instinct than from conscious decision. Victoria brought the microphone to her lips. The silence in the room was so complete that it felt almost suffocating, as if everyone had stopped breathing simultaneously. She could almost feel her mother's heartbeat from across the room, could sense the collective tension of hundreds of people waiting to see what she would do. She took a slow breath. When her voice emerged, it held no tremor, no cry of desperation or defeat. Her voice was absolutely clear, absolutely steady, and absolutely set and agreed. She said into the microphone, "That was all. That seemed wet." Then, with a gesture of perfect calm, she placed the microphone gently on the table beside the Master of Ceremonies. She turned slightly and gave her parents a small, reassuring nod, a silent communication that conveyed absolute calm, complete control, and at peace with what she was doing then. With the dignity of royalty, she addressed the frozen Master of Ceremonies directly. "I believe we can continue with the evening," she said in her normal voice, not through the microphone, her tone carrying an equal authority that required no amplification. I think this can be served now. The effect of her response devastated Derek far more profoundly than screaming or crying ever could have. Complete confusion rippled through the crowd like a wave. Guests looked at each other in bewilderment, unable to interpret what they had just witnessed. Derek's carefully constructed expression of righteous authority crumbled. His face registered pure shock. His carefully maintained composure shattered completely. This was not the response he had anticipated. He had expected a confrontation, with Victoria demanding to know WHO Serena was and why she was being kept in his life. Or he had expected capitulation, tears followed by reluctant acceptance. He was completely unprepared for this response of apparent agreement that somehow felt like a complete rejection. Victoria returned to her, said as though Derek's declaration had been nothing more significant than a minor announcement about the weather. She poured herself a glass of water and drank it slowly, deliberately, almost ceremonially. She moved with such absolute calm that observers began to question whether they had imagined the entire confrontation for the remainder of the party. Victoria maintained her composure with a kind of serenity that actually made the guests uncomfortable. She smiled, she nodded, she thanked the departing guests, and she accepted their expressions of concern with such composure that they began to wonder whether they should be sympathizing with her or feeling unsettled by her strange calm. Derek attempted to pull her aside several times. His voice was aged and confused when he whispered his questions. "What did you mean by agreed? We need to talk about this. What is happening?" Each time, Victoria gave the same response in a voice that was polite but absolutely cold. Later, she would say, but there was no warmth in her tone, only the kind of distance that tells someone they have been shut out completely. When the music finally stopped and the lights began to dim, signaling the end of the evening, Victoria's family prepared to leave. She embraced Derek's parents with the same grace and warmth she had shown everyone else. And no one could have guessed from her demeanor that their son's marriage had just been dismantled in front of several hundred witnesses. The drive from the estate back to the city, back to Victoria's home, felt like traveling through an alternate dimension. No one spoke in the car. Victoria's father gripped the steering wheel with unusual force, his knuckles whitening from the pressure. Her mother stared out at the dark streets, her thoughts clearly elsewhere, wrestling with the implications of what her daughter had just done. Victoria's in the back seat, watching the city lights pass by the window. The familiar landmarks of her hometown, which normally felt warm and welcoming, seemed strangely distant and bled. She was not experiencing sadness. The emotion that dominated her mind was relief. Like a heavy weight that she had not even consciously registered was pressing down on her, had suddenly been lifted away. She replayed Derek's words in her mind, not with emotional reactivity, but with the analytical perspective of someone trying to see problems clearly and identify structural flaws. Derek's declaration was not a minor crack in a foundation. It was fundamental damage that could not be patched or covered with fresh paint. A building with compromised foundations will eventually collapse, no matter how beautifully the exterior is decorated. The only sensible option is to demolish it and start fresh on solid grounds. The silence in the car was not empty. It was filled with her parents' lavender concern, with wounded pride, with the massive question of what would come next. Victoria understood that her parents were restraining themselves out of respect for her, giving her space to process what had happened. When the car finally pulled up in front of her home, her father turned off the engine, but for a moment, no one made a move to exit the vehicle. Victoria's father turned from the driver's seat to look at his daughter. In his usually gentleness, there was a storm of contained emotion. Victoria, except his voice low and slightly hoarse. Whatever you decide to do, your mother and I will support you completely. Always. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of unconditional commitment. Her mother turned down in the front seat, and finally, tears began rolling down her cheeks. Do not worry about what people will say, she whispered. Just think about your own happiness, sweetheart. We stand with you in this. It was this unconditional support that nearly broke Victoria's composure. A warmth spread through her chest, not manifesting as tears, but as a profound gratitude. She reached forward and took her mother's hand. Thank you, she whispered. I know what I need to do. She entered her bedroom, the space that reflected her personality perfectly. Creeper walls, minimalist wooden furniture, and a large design table positioned by the window where natural light poured in during the day. Everything was organized, efficient, and peaceful. She did not slam the door. She did not throw things out or express her anger through distraction. She simply sat on the edge of her bed and allowed the quiet of the night to repound her. Her phone on the nightstand vibrated almost continuously. Notifications of texts and missed calls alternated rhythmically. She glanced at the screen and saw dozens of messages from consent friends. Dozens of calls from Derek, each one representing escalating levels of agency and confusion. She opened the message thread and read Derek's words. Victoria, pick up your phone. We need to talk. Victoria, you did it deliberately to humiliate me with that ridiculous response. Victoria, I was just trying to be honest. Why are you acting so childishly? Victoria, answer me. Please answer me. Victoria read the messages without emotional reaction. They told her everything she needed to know. In the midst of this crisis, Derek's concern was not for Victoria's pain or their relationship. His way was entirely centered on his own wounded ego and his damage. He was rewriting the narrative, making himself the victim of honesty and labeling Victoria's responses immature and spiteful. She silenced her phone. There was nothing more to say. Everything had been communicated with perfect clarity in front of hundreds of witnesses. Victoria walked to her design table and switched on the lamp. On the wall were several sketches of a wedding dress, preliminary plans for a future home, and the color palette for the reception decoration. For months, these had been sources of joy and anticipation. Tonight, they seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. With deliberate intent, she began removing the papers one by one from the wall. She did not destroy them in a fit of rage. She simply gathered them carefully and stacked them neatly, storing them in a lower drawer. Out of sight, out of mind, she thought, recognizing the wisdom in allowing herself to put away the visual reminders of what would not come to pass. She then sat before her laptop and opened it. The light from the screen illuminated her face, and any one observing her would have seen complete peace and resolution. She opened a folder labeled Wedding Preparations Dedicated and created a new document. The title was Cancellation Protocol Wedding. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with purpose and precision. She drafted emails to each vendor and service provider. Her words were polite and professional, but they left no room for negotiation or discussion. SH. He explained that the wedding with Derek Sinclair was being cancelled due to personal circumstances. She stated that she was prepared to cover all cancellation fees and penalties stipulated in their contracts. By the time the distant sound of the morning call to prayer echoed through her window, Victoria had organized everything. She stood and stretched, walking to the window where the distant sky was beginning to turn pink with the approaching dawn. A new beginning was about to break across the city. Victoria felt completely at peace. There was no regret, only absolute certainty. She understood that the path ahead would not be simple. There would be gossip drama, wounded family members who would question her decision, her own heart that would need healing. But for the first time in months, perhaps longer, Victoria felt like she had reclaimed complete control of her own life. She picked up her phone and opened the contact information for the printing company that had been preparing the invitations. Before she pressed send on the first draft mail, she paused and smiled slightly. Her engagement party had ended in an explosion, but from the ashes of the distraction, Victoria was ready to rebuild her world according to her own design and her own values. The following morning, while much of the city was still waking, Victoria was already in action mode. She had not spent the night replaying the traumatic events of the evening. Instead, she had channeled her emotional energy into Peppa's collection, with a cup of tea steaming at her side. She sat before her laptop and opened the cancellation protocol document that she had prepared during the night. The first action was the most difficult one. The initial contact, reaching out to Mrs. Peterson, the wedding coordinator. A competent woman in her 50s who had become something of a friend to Victoria during the months of wedding planning. Victoria took a deep breath and pressed the call button. The phone rang twice before Mrs. Peterson answered, her voice bright and enthusiastic. "Good morning, Victoria. What a wonderful surprise to hear from you so early. I was just reviewing the final details for our meeting at the estate next week. The party last night was absolutely spectacular, if I may say so. Everyone was commenting on how beautifully everything came together. Victoria's heart raced, not from doubt but from knowing that the words she was about to speak would create significant disruption. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson. Thank you for everything you have done," she said, her voice remaining calm and clear. "I am calling to cancel everything." "Hola, Vite." There was a moment of silence and the end of the line. Victoria could hear Mrs. Peterson's sharp intake of breath. "Victoria, I am sorry, I think the connection must be unclear. Did you say cancel?" "Cancel the wedding, Mrs. Peterson," Victoria confirmed, her voice unwavering. "My wedding to Derek is not going to happen. I need you to stop all proceedings and contact every vendor with whom we have contracts. I will cover all cancellation fees. Please send me a detailed breakdown to my email." The silence that followed seemed to stretch indefinitely. Victoria could almost hear Mrs. Peterson's mind working through the implications of what she had just been told. "Victoria, surely this is not serious. This is not a joke, is it? There must be some misunderstanding. Perhaps you could speak with Derek, work something out together. My decision is final, Mrs. Peterson," Victoria's agent lied with absolute firmness. "I appreciate all your help. I do not need advice or mediation. I need you to execute the cancellation protocol." After that phone call ended, Victoria felt the first weight lift from her shoulders. She began sending the emails she had prepared during the night, one by one. Each message to a vendor, each confirmation of cancellation, felt like a step away from a future that had been built on unstable ground, while drafting an email to the floral designer. Victoria's parents entered her bedroom. Their faces looked exhausted, making it clear that they too had not slept well. Her mother began to speak softly, but Victoria tended her chair before her mother could finish tea and managing the cancellations. She said, gesturing to the laptop screen, showing her parents that she was already engaged in taking action before they had a chance to doubt her or question her. Resolved her father approached and looked at the list of vendors and services displayed on the screen. A list alongside. But there was a flash of relief in his eyes as he saw his daughter taking such decisive control of the situation. "Let me handle the financial aspects and the penalty negotiations," he offered. "You focus on yourself." "No, Dad," Victoria's aide family. "This is my responsibility. I initiated this and I need to complete it. I only need your support." That support manifested as a bowl of warm soup from her mother and a steady hand on her shoulder from her father. They did not bombard her with questions or demands for explanation. They trusted their daughter, of course. The repercussions did not stop there. Phone calls from relatives began arriving throughout the morning. Each caller's voice was tinged with shock and disbelief. Victoria answered each one with the same calm phrases and steady tone, leaving her relatives edging forwards and finding none. By midday, Cyril stormy-eyed. Her phone lit up with Derek's name and number. Victoria declined the call. Seconds later, an email notification arrived, copied to Derek, confirming the cancellation of the wedding event, and a text from Derek came immediately after, all in capital letters. "Are you insane? Did you really cancel everything without even speaking to me first? What were you thinking, Victoria? Victoria read the message and set the phone down. She knew Derek would come, and she was prepared for that conversation. Indeed, that afternoon, a black sports car came to an abrupt stop in front of Victoria's house. Derek practically threw himself from the vehicle, his face flushed with anger. He had not bothered to park properly, leaving the car at an awkward angle in the street, and pounded on the door with a chancy. When Victoria's father opened it, Derek bypassed each alketas entirely. Mr. Hartwell, I need to speak with Victoria right now, said, his tone demanding and rude. This is urgent. Why do not you come in, Derek? Her father suggested, attempting to defuse the situation with calm reason. Perhaps we can discuss this more peacefully. There is nothing peaceful to discuss, Derek responded, his voice beginning to rise. I need to speak to her immediately. Victoria appeared in the doorway. I will handle this, that she said quietly. I can talk to him outside. She walked toward the entrance and looked at Derek with an expression of complete blankness. What is it, Derek? Derek's anger erupted like a volcano. You canceled our wedding via mail, I shouted. You humiliated me in front of hundreds of people. And now you are acting as though none of this matters. What is wrong with you, Victoria? How could you do this? My head is exactly where it needs to be. Derek, Victoria responded with cold precision. It is in a place where you can think clearly. You are the one, WHO humiliated us both with the disgusting ultimatum at our engagement party. That was not honesty. That was arrogance and control, and I am not willing to accept it. She stood with her arms crossed. Her past conveyed absolute fairness and non-negotiability. Derek appeared frustrated, running his hands through his hair. Okay, I said, trying a different approach. I made a mistake. I chose the wrong time and the wrong place to discuss this. But was canceling everything really necessary? Do you understand what this means for our families? For the reputation of the Sinclair business empire. And there it was again. His concern revealed itself to be entirely about the reputation of his family, not about Victoria's pain or the dissolution of their relationship. This wedding is not about your family's reputation. Derek, Victoria said, her voice carrying sharp logical emphasis that systematically dismantled each of his arguments. It is about my life. I will not spend the rest of my existence with a man whose heart is still divided, whose loyalty is still partially invested in another woman. I am not willing to be a spouse who must constantly compete with the ghost of your ex-girlfriend. I never asked you to compete with anyone, Derek protested. My relationship with Serena is finished. It is over. Then why did you feel compelled to declare her permanent place in your life as a condition of our marriage? Why can you not simply let her go? Victoria asked pointedly. Derek fell silent. He had no answer. The absence of his response communicated everything Victoria needed to know. There is nothing else to say, she told him. You should leave. Please do not make us in here. Derek stared at her with a mixture of anger and something that might have been pain. So that is it? After everything we have shared? After all the plans we made together? We have not shared anything yet, Derek, and I am grateful that we are stopping now before it is too late, Victoria responded. Before we build something on a foundation as unstable as this one. She turned away from him and walked back inside, closing the door firmly behind her. Derek stood frozen on the porch for several moments, unable to process the finality of her rejection. Victoria leaned against the door briefly, breathing deeply. There were no tears, only an immense sense of relief and liberation. The battle was over, and she had won it for herself. Over the following weeks, the shock of the cancelled engagement began to settle into something that resembled a new reality. Victoria deliberately limited her social interactions, speaking only with her immediate family and her close saint friends. She needed space to breathe and time to redraw the blueprints of her life, which had been suddenly erased by this turn of events, to fill the void left by the absence of wedding planning and Derek. Victoria threw herself into what she did best, meaningful work. She contacted a senior architect she had known for several years and expressed her interest in finding a new and challenging project, something that would demand her complete attention and focus. The opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. A prominent art collector had acquired a historic property in the heart of the city's preserved historic district, a beautiful antebellum mansion that had been vacant for many years. The collector wanted to transform the building into a contemporary art deli while preserving its original architectural integrity. For Victoria, This project represented far more than simple employment. It was the perfect escape, the ideal setting for healing. The historic district, with its narrow cobblestone streets and walls that seemed to contain the accumulated history of centuries, was a sanctuary. The station project itself served as a metaphor for her own life, taking something old, broken, and forgotten, and breathing new life and purpose into it without erasing its essential character and soul. When Victoria visited the site for the first time, she fell instantly in love. The building was in terrible condition. Paint was peeling from the walls. Part of the roof had partially collapsed. The courtyard was overgrown with weeds and debris. Yet the basic structure remained solid. The original wooden columns still stood with dignified strength. And the delicate work on the balconies told stories of the past. She walked through the dusty rooms alone, running her hand along the cold plastic walls. She could reach Wallace how light would stream through the large windows once they were cleaned and restored. How the original pine floors would glow again after being carefully refinished. How contemporary artwork would create a stunning dialogue with the classical architecture underneath. The project was complex and would require precision and calibration. She would need to work with the Historic Preservation Society, find local craftspeople, understood traditional building techniques, and simultaneously design a modern interior that would serve as a gallery space. It was exactly the kind of challenge she needed. A complex problem to solve, beauty to create. Redemption to pursue. The building's owner was a man named Marcus Stone, someone Victoria had only communicated with by email and phone calls. Through their conversations, Victoria had formed the impression that he was meticulous and deliberate, someone with a strong artistic vision and deep respect for historical significance. They were scheduled to meet in person at the property for the first time. Victoria had arrived daily, moving through each area of the building, making quick sketches in her notebook, noting details she wanted to preserve and others she wanted to carefully modify. A calm voice behind her broke her concentration. Every time I come here, I discover something new that I had overlooked before. The voice said Victoria turned to find a man standing in the doorway. The afternoon light streaming in from outside created a silhouette around him. It was not striking in the way that Derek had been striking with designer clothes and the had manufactured importance. His clothing was simple, linen shirt and cotton pants. His face was not conventionally handsome in the traditional sense, but it radiated calm and observation. The face of someone who noticed details most people missed and introduced himself as Marquez, asking her to call him by his first name. Extended his hand, and when Victoria shook it, she felt his grip was firm and genuine. Not performative. You must be Victoria Hardwell, said with a slight smile. The sketches you sent me impressed me far more than any resume could have. I could see your vision immediately. Victoria was surprised by the unexpected compliment. Thank you, she said. I was equally impressed by your vision for this space. I think we see the same potential here. For the next 2 hours, they walked through the building together, discussing their station. Their conversation flowed with a naturality that felt more like two artists collaborating than a client and a contract discussing terms. They even had a disagreement, which turned out to be productive. Marquez wanted to preserve an ornately carved wooden mantelpiece that was deteriorating due to ancient termite damage. From a structural perspective, Victoria argued that the wood had been compromised and posed a potential danger. I understand the historical value, Victoria explained gently, but the termites have destroyed the interior structural integrity. If we insist on preserving these esses, it will eventually fail. What if we create a replica using salvaged wood and the original carving details, and then we frame and display the preserved original pieces as artwork on the wall? Marquez was quiet for a moment, looking at the mantelpiece and then at Victoria. His eyes brightened with something like respect. That is brilliant, he said. You do not just think about function. You respect the soul of the place. I like the way you work. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and amber. They sat on the dusty steps of the interior courtyard. Marquez seemed to sense something beneath Victoria's professional composure, a layer of vulnerability that she was managing carefully. He did not spraying questions or demand personal information. Instead, he simply said, I am grateful this property is in the right hands. I have a good feeling about this. It is going to be extraordinary. Those words, focused entirely on her professional ability and her vision, felt like a balm to Victoria's still aching heart. This was not just a project. It was a celebration. For the first time since engagement party, Victoria felt like she was not standing alone. Yet despite Victoria's efforts to bury herself in what the world outside would not forget about her so easily. The echoes of the failed engagement still surfaced occasionally. One day while purchasing coffee, she encountered a distant acquaintance of Derek's, a woman who immediately began speaking with false enthusiasm. Victoria, how wonderful to see you. I heard about you and Derek. Such a shame really. You seem so perfect together, the woman gushed. Derek seems to be under tremendous stress lately. I hope you are doing well. I suppose we all must find a warm pet. Victoria replied with a vague smile, and I wished him well. If you will excuse me, she left before the woman could ask more intrusive questions. On social media, she saw photos of mutual friends at events she was no longer invited to, gatherings with Derek that would have included her before. There was a small pen of exclusion, a reminder that dismantling a relationship meant also dismantling the social infrastructure built around that relationship without a genuine support. She received felt exponentially more powerful than the disappointment. Her closest friends never wavered. They did not interrogate her or force her to discuss things she was not ready to discuss. Instead, they brought food, watched movies with her at home, or simply sat in silence when she was exhausted. One evening, while her friends were gathered in her room, one of them said, "If you want to be angry, scream. If you want to cry, cry. We are here for all of it." That kind of unconditional acceptance strengthened Victoria more than any words of advice could have. Her family became her greatest resource. Her father frequently appeared at her station site, ostensibly to see the progress on the building, but really to make sure his daughter was eating properly and taking care of herself. He would bring lunch prepared by her mother and sit with Victoria while she worked. Her mother ensured that Victoria's living space remained comfortable and organized, quietly taking care of practical matters so that Victoria could focus on her healing and her work. This exact genuine, selfless support became the new foundation of Victoria's life. She began to recognize that she had been so focused on building a future with Derek that she had nearly forgotten she already possessed something valuable. A structure of love and support built by people who cared for her unconditionally. One afternoon, Victoria stood alone on the second floor of the station project, watching the sunset paint the sky above the city. It had been 1 month since the engagement party, 1 month of demolition and reconstruction, both literal and figurative. Acepta had remained uncertain, but for the first time, Victoria felt no fear. Cerebral surrounding her no longer seemed like the end of everything. It seemed more like the beginning of something more honest and more strong. Something built by her own hands and according to her own principles. Her station project progressed more rapidly than anyone had anticipated. Under Victoria's meticulous supervision, the old mansion began slowly recovering its former beauty. Local craftspeople worked with enthusiasm and dedication. Each day brought visible progress, visible transformation. Her station site became Victoria's sanctuary, a space where she maintained complete control and where logic and creativity matched in perfect harmony. But one warm afternoon, that harmony was disrupted. A familiar black sports car pulled up to the side, stain up dust. Derek emerged from the vehicle, and Victoria immediately noticed how different he looked. His hair was somewhat disheveled, his face drawn and gaunt, and his expensive suit seemed to hang loosely on his frame, as though he had lost a significant amount of weight in recent weeks. He carried a large bouquet of white lilies, Victoria's favorite flowers. Victoria was in the middle of discussing structural details with the foreman when she felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She gestured for the workers to continue and walked toward Derek with deliberate steps. "Derek, what are you doing here?" "This is my workplace," she said, her voice low and cutting. "I just wanted to talk," Derek replied, extending the flowers toward her. "These are for you." Victoria did not accept them. She simply waited, her expression unreadable. "Victoria, I am falling apart without you," Derek continued, and his tone was no longer angry but almost desperate. "Everything is a disaster. My business is failing. I cannot concentrate." "I was wrong, Victoria. I know I was wrong. I should never have said those things. I was being foolish." This was the first time Victoria had heard Derek admit to making a mistake, but something about the admission did not feel genuine. It sounded like the regret of a child whose toy had been broken, not the regret of someone who understood the harm they had caused. "We will change," Derek pleaded. "I promise I will fix things with Serena." I will establish boundaries with her. Please, just give me one more chance. Please, just as Victoria was about to respond, Mark Stone emerged from inside the building, carrying two bottles of water. Stopped when he saw the scene but did not approach. He remained in the doorway, his presence providing silent support and witness to the conversation. Derek's eyes immediately caught sight of Marquez. His expression of desperate pleading instantly transformed into something ugly and jealous. Ah, so that is it, Derek said sarcastically. You did not waste any time finding a replacement. Is that why you threw me away so quickly? Victoria's patience evaporated. Stop, Derek, she said forcefully. Do not involve anyone else in the problems you created. My decision has nothing to do with anyone else. It has everything to do with you and your actions. No, please leave, she repeated, her voice strong and distinct, causing some of the wakes to glance in her direction. And do not ever come to my workplace again. Do not contact me. Do not try to see me. We are finished. Derek's face hardened. He threw the bouquet of lilies to the ground, and without another word, attendant walked back to his car. He drove away quickly, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a pile of crushed white petals. Victoria closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her rapid breathing. Marquez approached slowly and offered her one of the water bottles. Are you okay? He asked gently. Victoria accepted the water and nodded. Yes, I really am, she said, and she realized that she meant it completely. The interruption from her past no longer had the power to ruin her day or derail her progress. The incident at the website, however, planted a seed of curiosity in Victoria's mind. She realized that as long as Arena remained a mystery, a shadow effigy in the background of her life with Derek, that shadow would continue to hold power. She needed closure. She needed to understand the full story, as if the universe had her silent request for answers. A message arrived on her phone the next day from an unknown number. Hello, Victoria Hartwell. This is Serena Mitchell. I heard that Derek visited your workplace yesterday. I believe there are some things we should discuss. For both of our sakes, would you be willing to meet? Victoria hesitated for only a moment before responding. This was her opportunity to obtain answers directly from the source. She agreed to meet. They arranged to meet at a quiet tea shop tucked away on a side street in the historic district. Serena was already seated at a corner table when Victoria arrived. She was an elegant woman with a strong professional presence. Her face was beautiful, but her eyes carried a trace of weariness. Thank you for coming, Serena said after they had ordered tea. I wanted an explanation as well, Victoria responded with honesty. Though Serena smiled slightly. I will not waste your time. Derek and I have a long history together, that much is true. But our romantic relationship ended more than a year ago, well before he met you. The problem is that Derek has never learned to be emotionally independent. She paused, seeming to search for the right words. Still depends on me for validation, for business advice, for his ego to be strong when he is feeling disgusted. I have tried to distance myself many times, but he always finds a way to pull me back in. Using business as an excuse or claiming that he simply needs a friend. Honestly, I am exhausted by it. Victoria listened carefully, absorbing every word Serena shared. The statement Derek made at your engagement party. Serena continued, her eyes meeting Victoria's with genuine sorrow. I did it without my permission. I was as shocked as everyone else when a friend told me about it. It was Derek's way of maintaining control, of demonstrating that he could have everything, you as his wife and me as his safety net. It was deeply unfair to both of us. Serena then showed Victoria her phone screen. There was a photograph of her with a man, both smiling genuinely. I am engaged to someone else, Victoria. I am trying to move on with my own life. But Derek keeps making things complicated. This was a turning point in Victoria's understanding. She had imagined some complex romantic triangle. The reality was much simple and said. It was a story of an emotionally immature man. WHO had held to women hostage in the drama of his own ego and insecurity. I understand, Victoria said finally, and there was relief in her voice. Thank you for being honest with me, Serena. It helps to hear this from you. Thank you for listening, Serena responded. Now you know this was never because you were not enough. It was because I was not mature enough to handle a real relationship with genuine commitment and honesty. Victoria left the tea shop feeling lighter than she had in weeks. the final layoff uncertainty had been lifted away. She was truly free. The days following that meeting felt brighter to Victoria, as though a heavy fog had finally dissipated. Freed from the weight of doubt, she drew herself into her station project with renewed energy and enthusiasm. The progress on the galley accelerated noticeably. Her relationship with Marquez also deepened during this period. They functioned as a solid team, capable of understanding each other with just a glance, able to communicate complex ideas with minimal words. They had developed a rhythm of collaboration that felt effortless and natural. One afternoon, while Victoria and Marcus were supervising the installation of a large glass roof structure over the interior courtyard, the clear sky above the city suddenly darkened. A strong wind began to blow, and within moments, a few drops of rain escalated into an intense storm. The workers quickly began securing equipment and seeking shelter. Victoria and Marcus found themselves trapped inside the main galley space that was already roofed, watching the rain pound against the floor of the uncovered courtyard beyond. The sound of heavy rain created an intimate and peaceful atmosphere. Rain always has a way of making us pause and reflect, Marquez said, breaking the silence. I turned to look at Victoria directly. You seem different these past few days. Later somehow, he released a weight he did not even know he was carrying, Victoria responded. I finally got the closure I needed. A long chapter of my life has truly closed. Marquez nodded with understanding. I did not press for more information or demand details. Instead, I gazed out at the rain. When my first relay failed, I thought it was the end of everything. I sighed quietly. I blamed everyone, blamed circumstances beyond my control. It took me a long time to realize that failure gave me the opportunity to stop, to see what had gone wrong, and to rebuild in a better way. Like this building, Victoria looked at Marquez, realizing that he rarely spoke about himself. Hearing about his past made her feel more connected to him. Both of them were. In their own ways, people WHO were rebuilding themselves, learning to construct something stronger from the ruins of what had come before. Sometimes demolishing something is just as important as building it, Victoria said softly, because it gives you the opportunity to construct a stronger foundation. Exactly, Marquez agreed. That is the truth I finally understood. They fell into silence again, but this time the silence was full of meaning. There were only the two of them and the soothing sound of the rain surrounding them. In the middle of a building still under construction, Victoria felt like she had found the most solid shelter imaginable. A place where she was truly understood without the need for many explanations or justifications, just as Serena had predicted. Without her as an unofficial advisor and emotional crutch, Derek's business empire began showing significant cracks. Given by emotion and wounded pride, Derek made a series of poor business decisions that became aggressive in negotiations, offended long-term clients, and dismissed advice from his own team members. The news eventually reached Victoria through an old friend who worked in the same business sector. A major real estate development project that Derek was overseeing in a major metropolitan area was on the verge of complete collapse. The primary investor had withdrawn funding, citing chaotic project management and the arrogant leadership style of the project head. Victoria felt no satisfaction upon hearing this news, only a vague sadness watching someone self-destruct through poor choices and refusal to grow. One evening, while working late in her home studio, reviewing renovation plans, Victoria received a phone call from Derek. This time, she decided to answer, sensing that perhaps this would be the final conversation between them. The voice on the end was filled with panic and desperation. All the arrogance had been stripped away, leaving only despair. Victoria, everything is gone, Derek said, his voice shaking. The project failed. The investors left. It is all my fault, I paused, and Victoria waited to hear what else would say. It is also Sarina's fault, I continued, his tone shifting toward the accusation. She refused to help me. She abandoned me when I needed her most. And then his blame pivoted toward Victoria. And it is also your fault. If you had not left me, I would not be in this situation. I need you, Victoria. Why did you leave me when I needed you most? Victoria listened calmly to the entire chain of accusations. In an earlier time, such words would have wounded her deeply. But now she had them as the voice of a stranger, drowning in his own problems and refusing to take responsibility for his choices. Derek, she said, her voice off but absolutely firm. Blaming everyone else is not going to fix your problems. You made your own choices in business and in our relationship. But I do hope you find a way to repair everything you have damaged. she interrupted before he could respond further. But that is no longer my responsibility. I have my own life now. Goodbye, Derek, she ended the call before I could continue pleading or arguing. This time, she had severed the final connection completely. She no longer felt anger or pity or even mild interest. She felt only neutrality. And neutrality, she understood, was a truest form of freedom. 2 months after her final conversation with Derek, the station project reached its first major milestone. The primary structural station was complete. The new roof was fully installed. Several walls had been reinforced and repainted in their original historical colors. The antique pine floors had been carefully refinished until they gleamed with beauty. To celebrate this achievement, Mark suggested a small gathering, just the core team and craftspeople. WHO had worked so diligently. That afternoon, in the main galley space, they assembled to express gratitude and share a simple meal together. The atmosphere was warm and filled with genuine appreciation. For Victoria, the moment was profoundly emotional. She looked around at the high ceilings, the steady columns, the golden light streaming in through the large windows. She had accomplished what she set out to do. She had transformed ruins into something beautiful and full of hope. It was a tangible testimony to her capability and her perseverance through difficulty. After the workers had departed, only Victoria and Marcus remained. They stood side by side in the center of the space, contemplating their work in comfortable silence. There was a time when it was not certain this place could be saved. Marcus said, his eyes traveling across the room. But you saw its potential and brought it back to life. We brought it back to life together, Victoria corrected with a smile. It was a true celebration. We were partners in this. Marcus turned toward her, his gaze deep and tender. Victoria, said, his voice more serious than she had heard it before. Working with you these past months has transformed more than just this building. Victoria felt her heart weaken slightly. From the first day I met you, I admired your strength, Marcus continued. I admired your talent and your ability to see beauty where others see only distraction and ruin. But as time progressed, I realized I was not just admiring you as a professional. I have come to love you. The confession was delivered with sincerity and without pressure, without grand gestures or theatrical declarations. It was simply an honest expression of genuine feeling. Victoria looked at Marcus's face, illuminated by the golden light of sunset. She saw warmth, respect, and authenticity reflected in his expression, all the things she had once longed for. She did not need to respond with words. The most genuine and radiant smile she had experienced in years spread across her face, in the middle of the galley that had become the symbol of her universe and transformation. Victoria understood that she had not only reconstructed a building, she had found a new foundation for her heart, and this time, it felt absolutely solid and unshakable. Marcus's sincere confession that afternoon opened new possibilities in their relationship. They did not rush forward impulsively. Instead, they allowed their feelings to grow organically and naturally. Much the same way, they had carefully nurtured and restored the old mansion. They were no longer simply architect and client, but ready to souls creating something beautiful together. Supporting each other's vision and dreams, their days became filled with joyful activity. From morning until evening, they spent time at the work site, discussing which paint colors would work best with the natural light patterns, debating the optimal placement of gallery lighting so that each artwork would be displayed to its greatest advantage. Victoria focused on the technical and functional aspects of the space, while Marcus brought an artistic and philosophical perspective. Together, they complemented each other perfectly. They often remained, after all the workers had gone home, sitting on a blanket on the dusty floor, sharing a simple meal from a container and talking about things beyond the immediate scope of the project. Victoria shared her dreams of designing schools in rural areas where architectural beauty and functional design could serve communities with limited resources. Marcus told her about his travels throughout the region, about meeting with local artists and learning their unique perspectives on creativity and cultural expression. In these relaxed conversations, Victoria discovered a peace she had never experienced with Derek. With Marcus, she did not need to be a perfect version of herself. She could be her complete self, the sometimes overly perfectionistic architect, the woman still learning to heal her wounds, the dreamer with occasionally unconventional ideas. Marcus accepted all of it and seemed to genuinely cherish every aspect of her personality. One evening, while they sat together under the stars, Mark gently brushed a strand of hair away from her face. I love how you feel your brow when you are thinking deeply. As I read a smile. It seems like you are drawing the blueprints of the universe in your head. Victoria left, her cheeks flashing slightly with pleasure. For the first time in her adult life, she felt truly seen as a complete human being with all her complexities. Not as an accessory or an asset to someone else's life project. The process of building Segeli became a beautiful metaphor for their relationship. Slow and thoughtful, respectful of the past, but with a clear vision for a bright future. As the interior wake up the galley grew toward completion, Mark surprised Victoria with an invitation. Would you like to come to my home this weekend? Asked Kechawali. Not my apartment in the city, but where he grew up. My mother has been wanting to meet the brilliant architect who transformed the tall building. Victoria's heart stirred with emotion. It felt like an important step forward. She remembered how formal and tense her first meeting with Derek's family had been. How much emphasis had been placed on Imogen's status, but seeing the warm expression in Marcus's says, Victoria knew that this experience would be fundamentally different. Marcus's mother's home was situated in a small countryside village known for its community of artisans and craftspeople. The house was modest, a wooden structure surrounded by an exuberant and well-maintained garden. On the porch, a middle-aged woman with a kind smile was creating pate. This was Mrs. Cole, Marcus's mother. The meeting was completely comfortable and natural. Mrs. Cole greeted Victoria with a warm embraces, though they were old friends rather than people meeting for the first time. She did not ask about Victoria's family, background or educational credentials. Instead, she asked enthusiastically about the station process and the philosophy behind Victoria's material choices. Victoria, you had saved the soul of that building, Mrs. Cole said while sipping hot tea. That building was the legacy of my late husband. Seeing it come back to life is the greatest happiness for our family. Victoria spent the day chatting comfortably on the porch, learning about pate techniques and listening to stories from Marcus's childhood. She could see where Marcus had developed his empathy and his deep love for art and beauty. In this simple and warm moment, Victoria felt accepted unconditionally. She was not a future daughter-in-law being evaluated and judged. She was a valued guest, appreciated simply for being who she was. As they departed at sunset, Mrs. Cole took Victoria's hands gently. Please take care of my son, she requested. Since meeting you, his light has begun shining more brightly than it has in years. On the drive back to the city, Victoria sat in peaceful silence, her heart full. The man beside her, concentrating on the road, was not just a romantic partner. It was a home, a solid foundation built on sincerity and the warmth of genuine family connection. A few weeks before the grand opening celebration of the galley, Victoria received a message from Derek. It was brief and carried a completely different tone than all his previous communications. Victoria, could you give me a moment of your time, one final time? There is something I need to tell you in person. I promise I will not bother you again. With her heart already calm and peaceful, Victoria agreed to meet him. They arranged to meet at the same tea shop where she had met with Serena. Cedric, who greeted her, was a completely different person from the arrogant man she had known before. There was no trace of the old arrogance. He appeared thin, quiet, and there was a maturity evident in his eyes that had not been there previously. I ordered a simple black coffee, not an expensive specialty drinks. Thank you for coming, he began. I will not take up much of your time. I just wanted to do something I should have done long ago. He looked directly into Victoria's eyes. I am sorry, he said, his voice steady and sincere. I apologize for everything I did, for my words at that party, for my ego and my immaturity. I destroyed something good because of my stupidity, and it took me months to understand the depth of what he had done. I shared briefly that he had lost his business, but that the loss had become his turning point. He was working to rebuild everything from scratch in a more honest and ethical way. He also mentioned that he had several contact with Serena and wished her complete happiness. He added, you are happy now. Derek continued with a slight smile. I am genuinely glad. You deserve the best. Victoria felt the final weight, one she had not even consciously carried, finally lifted completely from her shoulders. There was no anger, no disappointment, only peace. Thank you for your apology, Victoria said. I accept it. I hope you also rebuild a better life for yourself. They shook hands. a gesture that peacefully closed this particular chapter of Victoria's life. When Victoria left the tea shop, she understood that Derek Pierce had truly become the epilogue of her story. No longer the main character or the central focus of her narrative, the arc-daily project had reached 100% completion. The building now stood magnificent, a perfect blend of old well-charmed new world spirit and innovation. To celebrate before the official grand opening, Marquez took Victoria to one final location. There is one more place I want to show you, he said. A place where you always find inspiration when beginning something new. He brought her to a historic botanical garden in the city. When they arrived, the afternoon sun was beginning its descent, bathing the magnificent park and its historic monuments in golden light. The atmosphere felt magical and sacred. They walked among ancient trees, discussing history, legacy, and the things that endure through time and change. As the sun nearly reached the horizon, painting the sky with a palette of pebbles, oranges, and deep reds, Marquez led Victoria to a location with a perfect view of the harbor and the city skyline. He stopped and turned toward her. He did not fall to his knee in traditional fashion. He simply took both of Victoria's hands gently between his warm ones. Victoria Hardwell, he began, his voice soft but filled with emotion. Our story began at sunset in an old house that was nearly in ruins. You came and transformed it into a place filled with light and hope. You have done the same for my life. Victoria felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. I want to spend the day sunset and the day sunrise of my life with you, Marquez continued. I want to build something with you that will endure, not something made of stone and mortar, but something built from love and respect and genuine partnership. He removed a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple but exquisitely beautiful ring, with delicate details inspired by the metal work from the galley they had restored together. Clearly, he had designed it himself with great care. Will you marry me? He asked, standing in the majesty of a historic garden that had witnessed thousands of sunsets, with her heart overflowing with genuine happiness and peace. Victoria responded with a voice that trembled with emotion but never wavered. Yes, she said. Yes, I will marry you. Marquez's evening of the Grand Galley opening was a celebration that was spectacular not because of empty luxury but because of a profound richness of spirit and authentic joy. The space was filled with artists, collectors, friends, and family members. Soft classical music mingled with warm laughter and genuine conversation. Each artwork displayed seemed to sing in celebration of its new home. The galley was named Renaissance, symbolizing new beginnings and transformation. Victoria stood in the center of space beside her fiancé Marquez, dressed in an elegant ivory gown. Her face radiated a happiness that could not be hidden nor suppressed. Her eyes traveled down the room, absorbing the reality of what they had created together. Her parents stood in one corner, observing her with clear pride and joy. Across the room, Victoria caught sight of Sarina and her fiancé, and they exchanged a brief smile of understanding and mutual respect. That evening, Victoria delivered a brief speech. She spoke about the philosophy behind her restoration, about the importance of honoring the past while building a stronger future. When she thanked the team for their dedication and hard work, her eyes found Marquez's across the crowd, and everyone in the room could see the lavender nation flowing between them later. While the celebration was at its height, Victoria and Marquez slipped away to the courtyard, which had been transformed into a small garden beneath the glass roof. From their vantage point, they could see the full moon shining brightly in the night sky. Victoria breathed deeply of the cool evening air of the city. She reflected on her engagement party 1 year ago, on the humiliation and confusion she had experienced, and on the cold decision she had made that night. That single word, agreed, which she had spoken into the microphone, had not been a word of the end. It had been a word of beginning, so word that had opened the door to her authentic life. She had weathered the storm, demolished the defective foundation, and with patience and intention, had rebuilt everything from the ground up. Marquez drew her closer, wrapping his arm around her. Look at what we have built together, he whispered. Victoria smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. Her name, Victoria, meant victory. After a long period of darkness and confusion, she was finally shining again. Not with borrowed light, but with her own light, complete and radiant and true. And beside her was Marquez, her constant, her partner, her home. WHO did not try to dim her light, but who would always be there to walk beside her through every sunrise and every sunset that lay ahead.